behalf of ASSAf, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar on the use of artificial intelligence in higher education, the jungle, so to speak, out there. We are gathered here at an exciting and pivotal time, a time when AI is reshaping the way we teach, learn, research, and manage our institutions. This webinar provides us with an opportunity to explore not only the possibilities that AI offer, but also the challenges and responsibilities that come with it. As educators, researchers, and leaders, we share a common goal, and that is to harness the power of technology in ways that enhance human potential, promote inclusion, and uphold academic integrity. I encourage you to engage actively, share your insights, learn from one another as we discuss how AI can strengthen higher education, making it more adaptive, innovative, and future-ready. Thank you for being here, and I wish you an inspiring and productive session. In a recent community of experts meeting that we had on the use of AI to improve efficiency, both in higher education, in government, and also in the private sector, there was one thing that came out as a common denominator, and that was that we accept that people know and are all well informed about AI. In each one of these different spheres, in the short term, it was recommended that both business leaders, government officials, and academics be exposed to what AI actually is. So I'm looking forward to your insights this afternoon to see how we move forward on this extremely important topic. Thank you very much and welcome.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, so Dr. Bekker, I'm just handing over to you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for the kind welcome. And again, thank you everyone. I see as we speak, the numbers are running up. Welcome everyone. And again, thank you, Prof. Cloete. Folks, it seems we've had so many people registering that the colleagues at ASSAf have decided or have been forced to change the license. And I think that it means that for participants, you can't see the names necessarily of other participants. And that accommodates a larger cohort of people to join in. So we apologize for that. And I see as we speak, it's still running up. Right. Folks, we're part of a larger ASSAf series, this Lekgotla, AI Lekgotla series, where we started by asking what are large language models? How does that fit into AI? Why is this being thrust upon us all of a sudden? And we then pivoted through a whole series of cycles. So what are the problems? What are the biases? What are the training issues with that? What are the good use cases? What are the bad use cases? We looked at a whole series of discussions on cheating and whether we are superpowering that. We looked at opportunities within research and what are the good opportunities, what are the unexplored avenues of machine learning. And then most recently, we looked at companionship and chatbots and tools. We even looked at an AI supervisor that generated quite a lot of interest. So I want us to think back at the story that is oft raised by legal scholars, but now increasingly in the ML space as well. The 1890 essay in the Harvard Law Review about the right to privacy, or privacy if you insist. This article, 1890, The Right to Privacy, came in the light of a new invention, the instantaneous photograph. In other words, we've always had an idea of this concept, this abstract idea of privacy, but technology and changes in technology forced us to rethink something that we thought was settled. We had to clarify what we mean. We used to think that privacy was a function of property and space, the home, and certain personal contents, my letters, for instance. But we came to redefine it as personhood. So the likeness of a person that should not, in good ethics, cannot be taken without consent. And then we had to change our legal framework in that case, but also with normative impacts on how we think in terms of the ethical space about how we mitigate or protect against those abuses. And in a way, that's why we're here today. LLMs are doing the same thing. We are, all of us are, rethinking teaching and learning, research, and certainly assessments of our students. So what we're going to do today in terms of a plan is we will engage with a series of experts that we've got. I'll introduce them shortly. And for about 45 minutes or so, we'll have let's call it a facilitator-led Q&A. So there might be one presentation of 2 slides here, or a picture, or maybe a website shown as illustration. But generally, the idea is that we've brought for you a series of experts across epistemic communities, across institutions within South Africa, to help us think through where we are in terms of formulating and guiding. Once we've done that, so hopefully before the hour is up, we'll switch over to a panelist-led discussion, as we've done throughout this Lekgotla series. In other words, what we will do is allow for the panelists to question one another for points of clarification, points of priority, or if there are any outright disputes, then we'll put that on the table. We are the opposite of all of social media. We want to engage in good faith. And that's what we hope to do. And then after that, we will engage with an audience Q&A. Now, if it is possible, and I'll be told by a voice somewhere if it's not, please engage in the meantime through the chat function. I myself am not very good at listening and making notes and answering in the chat, but I know that some of the panelists are, and certainly everyone has the the liberty to answer, and there's normally quite a robust discussion there. So here to report on the state of play, these policies that we have firstly Sukaina Walji from UCT, where she's the director of the Center of Information and in Teaching and Learning. We have these centers in all universities, as you know, with long names that have heavy acronyms. This is no different. Sukaina leads the University Capacity Development Project on Assessment and AI Literacy, and also co-leads the AI Teaching Innovation Grants Program. We have Dr. Nicola Pallitt, who's a senior lecturer and EdTech specialist at Rhodes. She's based at the Center for Higher Education Research, Teaching and Learning, and works on, I love this phrase, critical and compassionate approaches to education technologies. Also leads the Higher Education Learning and Teaching Association of Southern Africa. We have Professor Anné Verhoef, Professor of Philosophy at Northwest University. He holds 2 PhDs, one from Stellenbosch and one from the FU. He's director of Northwest University AI Hub, and also the founder of the AI Circle of Southern Africa for higher education. We have Ms. Phindiwe Kamolane, who's a chartered accountant, also an executive for digital teaching and learning over at Unisa. Phindiwe runs the Digital Transformation Initiative and has piloted the compulsory academic integrity course for Unisa's 260,000 students. And we have, I'm not sure if it's joined us yet. Oh, yes, I see he has, which is wonderful. Dr. Olalekan Ogunleye, who's an AI researcher based at the University of Mpumalanga with wide experience, wide exposure. He was, among many other things, part of the team that developed the UMP's AI usage guidelines. So we have someone here from the oldest university in South Africa and someone from the youngest university. I trust that is Mpumalanga. I think Solplaatje is found in the same year, right? From the oldest and youngest, the biggest, certainly. And we're going to swing into the questions immediately. And the question one is, we've got folks here from different universities, from different institutions with different kinds of thinking. Could you explain the basic principles of your institution's position on generative AI, large language models and the like, and the reasoning behind it? Are we going to Sukaina first? Sukaina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And thank you for the invitation. So before I address our position, UCT's position on generative AI specifically, I do want to emphasize that UCT, like other universities, has had a long-established foundation in AI research that predates generative AI and the explosion. For example, we've had an AI research unit based in the computer science department and so on. And we're currently establishing a new AI institute. So the reason for saying that is that universities do already have expertise in foundational research as well as applied AI research. So what I'm going to say is within that context, and hopefully it will become clearer as to what strategies we might use, but particularly it's around looking at your own expertise within as well as we respond. So while generative AI has brought AI into the teaching and learning spotlight, it is important to remember that AI has been around for many decades, 60 years, and including in teaching and learning. And so I think our institutional engagement has to be much broader and deeper than looking at, because we're sort of responding just to ChatGPT and education applications. And that's really the framing. But that said, for teaching and learning specifically, and from where I am operating as the director of the Centre for Innovation, Learning and Teaching, SILT at UCT. I am also the chair of our AI in Education working group, soon to become, or has become, our AI in Education Committee of Practice for the institution. We have, and the question was really like, what is your institutional position? And our position is then framed in our recently ratified framework. It's called a UCT Framework for AI in Education, Generative and Other AI in Teaching and Learning and Assessment. And we deliberately did that because we had a 6 to 8 month consultation around, trying to answer the question, what does it mean for UCT to, what is UCT's position, the question you're asking, in relation to generative AI? And we came up with this framework through stakeholder consultation. And there was considerable debate around whether it should be just Gen AI or broader than that, and what this means. And so I think when you do this sort of work, you quickly get away from some of the technical issues to actually some of the underlying philosophical underpinnings of what we are doing and why we are doing this. So I'll post, after my little interlude, I'll post some links into the chat, but not to be distracted now. So, okay, what are the principles? So I'm going to just quickly read them out, and they will be very familiar. So our 6 guiding principles around responding to generative AI is ethical and responsible. So we promote ethical and responsible use of AI. We foster critical AI literacies as a core competency. We're maintaining a human-centered approach to education, ensuring equity and accessibility in AI use. Number 5, balancing innovation with responsible implementation. And then lastly, supporting continuous learning and agility to adapt to advancements. Now, I want to be clear, each of these principles probably sound very familiar: ethical use, critical AI literacies, equity, accessibility, but they are themselves deeply contested concepts that require ongoing reflection, institutional discussion, and meaning making. That's really the point I want to say. Just because we say these things, and we do, they've come through consultation, it's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of actually what does it mean? What does ethical use mean when AI models are trained on contested data? How do we define equity when students have differential access to premium tools, and so on? And I think that's what I'm saying here, is that while we have a framework, the work we're actively engaged in is not settled questions, but ongoing dialogue. And this is really how we want to move forward with the broader community as we shape UCT's response to AI, what it means for us. Very quickly as well, why did we go for a framework rather than a policy? So policies suggest fixed rules, compliance mechanisms, but given the rapid pace of AI development, we recognize that would probably be counterproductive and get bogged down. But the framework provides high-level guidance and it articulates our position at this moment in time. Essentially, it's where we stand in 2025 around what we want to do. It's also high-level principles, but we also have a roadmap that addresses practical concerns, because I'm sure for those of you who have done policy work and consultation, you get the pushback saying, but yes, it's just words. What does it actually mean in practice? So we built in a roadmap within the framework that acknowledges constraints, resources required, and so on. I will, as I said, I'll post the framework into the chat. Effectively, to operationalize the framework, we have 3 pillars. And most of our AI work fits under one of these 3 pillars. The first is promoting AI literacies. So this addresses the practical need for capacity building, but also kind of philosophical commitment to critical and ethical engagement. What does literacies mean? Who gets to say what they are? So this just isn't about functional skills. But it, at the same time, has an 18-month sort of plan for what types of training will be rolled out and what we think is required. Our second pillar is ensuring assessment integrity. This came up very strongly as a requirement. It was top of mind, and we're responding to that. So it's around responding to immediate practical pressures around assessment security. What do we do with assessments? How can we secure, and so on. And each discipline and course and qualification needs to take a different approach appropriate to the learning outcomes. But it's also around what is assessment, and actually, is it really about curriculum that we're talking about, not about assessment? And again, the roadmap with this pillar says what is available right now for assessment redesign assistance, but also what we think the big questions are coming up. And then the third pillar is around AI-enabled innovation. So this is balancing the issues, challenges around integrity, the need for literacies, with a call to say, can AI help us innovate in our teaching and learning spaces? And so can we innovate in curriculum and pedagogy and assessment? And this pillar's roadmap includes pilots for AI teaching and learning use cases, as well as processes for developing the best set of AI capabilities that will be needed in our teaching and learning ecosystem in the future. So the reasoning behind this framework is we're deliberately pragmatic and intentional in terms of design rather than reactive. And we wanted to move away from the sense of crisis and attention on associating AI purely with academic misconduct. We recognized early that neither banning AI nor uncritically embracing it is going to serve either our students or ourselves. And we acknowledge that AI is a dual-purpose technology, both deeply problematic, that can undermine traditional pedagogies, but also has much to offer us. And that's where I'm going to stop there in the interest of time. Thank you.
Thanks, Sukaina. Lots of questions from that, and what a wonderful scene that you've set there. Let's pivot straight into Nicola. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin. So Rhodes University, and I must say I was at UCT previously, and it has been quite a big shift going from one research intensive to another that's much smaller and very differently resourced. And I think that will come out through the discussion, and I want to remind people that that is a very, very important factor, is the unequal resourcing across our institutions, and we're also positioned very differently. So our center is located Churchill Center for Higher Education, Research, Teaching and Learning, and the EdTech team that I'm part of specifically, we are situated within the Faculty of Education, and we provide both operational support to colleagues in other faculties, but also do quite a bit of academic research and supervision of postgraduate students ourselves. So I think that makes us quite a unique animal. But so how we've approached it is more situated within higher education scholarship, yes, we are also focused on critical AI literacies in our guidelines. So, yeah, I should actually have started there. So we chose to develop guidelines rather than a fixed policy, which would allow us to revise these on a continuous basis in response to this rapidly evolving AI landscape. So we have actually got 3 guidelines, one for students, one for teaching and learning with AI tools for lecturers, and another on guidelines for assessment in the time of AI. So back to the higher education framing, we encourage colleagues to engage with the tough question, which is that we've got to think about what higher education is really for. And we encourage colleagues to think about, and students, around disciplinary knowledge building. And we aim to support academic practices that foster students' capacity to become knowledge creators rather than just information consumers, preparing them for lifelong learning in a world that is fundamentally going to be changed by AI. A core principle is also to, yes, also have ongoing conversations and in the process educate our community. And this involves helping students and staff understand how generative AI works, recognizing inequalities and biases associated with these tools, and examining ethical issues, practicing appropriate use. We are also very anti, that AI is not just about plagiarism detection, and how do we move from a punitive approach in terms of AI use to a more, in the words of Sarah Eaton, going from developmental to a restorative approach, which is quite tricky. And I think that will come out later again. But yes, main things I think is around what is higher education for, and encouraging lecturers, students to think about AI within the context of disciplinary knowledge building.
Thank you, Nicola. Anné. Sure,
Yes, can you see and hear me, Martin?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, yes, I just posted in the chat also the link to the website of Northwest University's AI website, because I'm going to refer to a lot of documents. I'm not going to show them, but participants are welcome to have a look there. Yeah, and thank you for the invite. My experience is that we all learn together as universities. That's, I think, the nice thing about AI. It's new for all of us, and we have to learn. So I'm glad to be part of this conversation and also learn from my colleagues. So I'm going to answer your question short and sweet, Martin. We have a lot of people. So we have, I think, basically 2 principles at Northwest that guide our institution's policy or take or approach to AI. The 2 principles. First one is to embrace AI within an ethical and responsible way. So it's really to embrace it. But it's just not, we cannot just say to embrace it, it must be qualified with ethical, responsible. And I think a choice for this, to embrace it fully, is because we know this is the future. AI is not going to go away. We need to explore the potential of AI, especially in academic context, for research, for teaching, learning. But we also have to learn how to use it critically, ethically, responsibly, because there are a lot of risks and dangers involved with AI use. The second principle is that we want to be and remain human within our use of AI. It's a human-centered approach. And we make a deliberate choice for following that, or on a principled level, because AI can break down what's valuable for us as human beings. Our basic skills and abilities can be sidelined if we get over-dependent, over-reliance, or if we do a lot of cognitive downloading. We can even be manipulated by AI if we do not engage with it critically. So Our approach is, or the principle is, AI should serve us as human beings and contribute to our societies, our dreams, and not the other way around, that we serve AI and become part of its algorithms and its data and make people rich through it or get manipulated through different ideologies. And both, I must say, both these principles, to embrace it ethically, responsibly, and to remain human, first of all, in our use of AI, is part of our policy, our strategy, our whole approach. And of course, the challenge is then how to implement this on a practical level. I'll stop there, Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, Anné. You took us back to Wall Street there with money. Money should serve people. People shouldn't serve money. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Phindiwe, you're up next.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is having a great day. It's always a disadvantage to be the last speaker because everybody then just sums up what they have been doing in their space, which is similar to yours. But we look at promoting augmented intelligence and how does in human form we need AI in order to advance superior outputs within our work. Therefore, the institution has been very good at promoting ethical utilization of AI through the drafting of its policy and procedures. We did so through bottom-up approach, whereby there were several consultations that took place within the colleges, within the administrative spheres, in order to inform our policy and our framework. So unlike UCT, we actually developed guidelines and not framework so that we can operationalize the day-to-day activities that may be required within the spheres. We look at the principles of integrity first, ensuring that there is ethical and responsible utilization of AI, providing students with those examples that they need. And what we are seeing right now is that there might not be a deeper exploration of the utilization of AI tools. And maybe, Chair, just to decrease, to inform the participants that Google has announced its availability to students for free of their Gemini Pro. So students might then have much advanced tools that they can work from. We see this because I think we're still dealing with the challenges of the unreadiness of school leavers, right? Coming into the university space, and AI giving us those opportunities of multilingualism, ensuring students can also personalize their learning. So from our side, we do have two critical centers that have advanced AI through the academic development and open virtual hub, which has advanced some of the AI trainings through MOOCs and student webinars. And from academic and an administrative perspective, we're still relying on our CPD department to produce the relevant training to ensure that we can advance the AI academic literacy. We have introduced the compulsory academic course. I can touch on it a bit later on for our NQF 5 to NQF 8 students. As Martin has said through the introduction, we were very successful with over 260,000 students who have participated within the course, and we have had a positive outcomes out of it because it seems that students themselves are unaware on how to utilize AI, but also are unaware on what is ethical utilization of AI. Within our policies and the guidelines, what we have established is a multi
Phindiwe, can you hear me?
Researchers in order for us to then align those key roles and responsibilities.
Oh, I'm losing you. Can anyone else confirm that it's not the bandwidth on my end?
I can confirm.
Oh,
I
dear.
think we.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Phindiwe, we may have to come back to you. Okay, lots of thumbs up there, and she was just in full swing, which is a real pity. Hopefully, Phindiwe, do you want to try? Do you want to try again? We lost the last 30 seconds, which was fairly crucial.
Yes. So our AI task team was approved by Senate in September 2023. It has 6 sub teams looking at the AI-driven research, AI-powered student support, AI-assisted assessment, enhanced teaching. We separated the enhanced teaching and learning with how do you infuse module design utilizing AI, and also our powered data analytics. There have been some great output. One of those has been obviously the AI policy and guidelines that have come out of the team. And also we're looking at the data aspect as to how do you track the activities from your students to ensure that you can then nudge them if you see non-participation on their online. But more so, obviously, the university is a distance learning institution, and we then have to then protect our online assessments through various AI proctoring tools that we are utilizing, but also the College of Science, Engineering and Technology through one of their centers, which looks at augmented intelligence and data science. They have developed the own Unisa proctoring tool, which they'll be rolling out soon. So there's various activities that we have rolled out, but most importantly, our stance is to ensure that we advance AI use by our academics and our students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, so many questions that we could explore. Thinking about feedback, you know, on 260,000 students doing AI literacy training, or you know, about the proctoring tool. So hopefully we can come back to that. Finally, we've got Olalekan. Doc, the floor is yours.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure being part of this august body. So just to quickly, without wasting time, we understand that UMP, that the proliferation of artificial intelligence and generative AI is becoming something that we cannot run away from. And as a result, we have our position. We do not also develop policy. Instead, we created generative AI guidelines. So our position in one line is basically that we enable generative AI to enhance learning, research, and administration, but only with disclosure, human accountability, and also fairness, as well as privacy by design, especially to our staff. And at UMP, there are 6 core principles, and what of those principles behind our generative AI guideline means is that academic integrity and transparency is very, very important. So staff and students needs to use generative AI where it is permitted, but they need to always disclose and to say when and how they use it. So as a result, clear acknowledgement is required, and lecturers can set task by task rules. So when generative AI is allowed in coursework, we typically cap it as a generative AI content, maybe e.g. around 25% with generative AI, and require proper citation. Also, we take into consideration human accountability and oversight, because we realize that AI assists, but it does not author or decide. So as a result, humans remain responsible for accuracy, for ethics, and for outcomes. And they must always verify for bias and hallucination, especially in research. And they've got to disclose it where they use it. Another thing is that there's fairness and non-discrimination. As a result, we make sure that we monitor AI use in anything that we do, admissions, grading, hiring, and also in our staff's research to avoid embedding bias and decision that must not just be, decision that must be just and must be reviewable. Another thing is that when using generative AI, always ensure that privacy and copyright compliance is embedded in your use. That is, do not impute personal and sensitive data into generative AI tools. Also, we take into consideration governance, training, and support. Our policy is owned by the TVC Teaching and Learning, MENCO, and also the CIO. But we notice that even when you are going to use generative AI, part of the research that we do is that one needs to understand how to prompt the tool. So one of the challenges that many people have is that proper prompting of generative AI is very, very important. As a result, we have prompt engineering workshops for our staff and students every now and then. So if I have to leave you with, let's say, 3 words in our in the UNP's position on the use of generative AI, it is enable, disclose, and protect. That is basically our Gen AI ethos in action. Thank you. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much. Well, let's swing immediately into the next question, the second of 3 questions. We're going to lift the hood a little bit and get into the messy details here. And this is a space among friends. So we're talking about our specific institutions. 2 questions about this. The first is, what is the relationship between the guidelines? We've had guidelines and framework. What is the relationship between that for students, maybe undergraduate students and postgraduate students? Is there a distinction or not? Are they all lumped together? What about staff? What about, do we split that and see staff as, well, there's academic staff, maybe there's research staff, maybe they're different. Maybe admin staff are seen as different. So what are these divisions, these cleavages, the shibboleths that we use within our organizations in terms of the guidance that we are providing? That's part A. And part B, are the schisms maybe not between undergrad and postgrad, or between teaching and assessment, but between different, let's call it, disciplinary cultures? So between the folks from law versus the folks from humanities, the engineers and those from arts. So this is, we're bearing our souls to one another as we learn. And I'm going to ask Phindiwe, can you lead us on this, please?
Thank you, Martin. I think from Unisa, we don't have a differentiated policy to address the specific domains, right? We are hoping that the colleges themselves will then inform through the established guideline, then extrapolate it further to find relevance within their specializations and domain. As earlier indicated, from an institutional approach, having identified the increasing usage of AI among students, we then rolled out the compulsory academic integrity course. And one of the reasons was that we were seeing that the problem is actually multi-layered. One, that students are not well advanced in terms of academic writing. One of the speakers, I think it was Nicola, she spoke about not looking at it at a punitive measure, but having an educational approach. So how do you advance academic skills knowing that your incoming students are also struggling with comprehension, right? So we advanced, the academic integrity course has 5 topics within it. So what is UNISA's values mission in relation to academic integrity? Secondly, what is academic integrity? And part of the feedback that students provided was that they were actually not aware that the examples that we had provided to them, as this is unethical, that they thought it was actually an okay manner to utilize AI and provide us with outputs. Secondly, even when we speak about AI utilization, which is one of the modules within the course, you find that the ethical use of drafting, outlining, having input in the final outcome, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, it's quite not clear. One of the studies we're engaging with the students on actually revealed that students themselves are unaware how to utilize these tools. They're very good in asking the first question of what or how, or copy and paste what their lecturer would have said, but they are unable to progress into enriched learning by prompting it further to say, provide me an example, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old, or do that sense check to say what you're saying, you understand. And that's what we were trying to build. There is a gap that we do recognize, that from an academics perspective, we haven't advanced a lot of AI literacy skills. They are left on their own on the various tools to determine which way they will want to personalize, gamify, or visualize their learning content. It's something that we are working on as part of the AI task teams, but we have provided sufficient prompting guidelines as a starting base for the student, at least for them to understand the gray areas and the gray matters that are there. So I think we have done well, because we have advanced a chatbot within the module so that the student can then engage within the boundaries of the learning objectives and outcomes of that module, for them to then understand it at a much deeper and personalized level. I will leave it at that for our institution, as we have understood that there's some strengths in what we have done so far, but there's still much more that needs to be done, particularly when we look at the UK and the US, the manner in which they have gamified their learning. If we consider as well whether the Bloom taxonomy is still relevant from a pedagogical perspective, because we then need to look at the higher order of creation and evaluation, rather than knowledge recall that we already know that AI provides easily. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Phindiwe. Anné, we're talking about your institution, your guidelines, how they sit, how they break into different facets. What are things like at Northwest?
Yeah, thank you, Martin. So just to answer your questions straight, do policies and guidelines at our university allow for disciplinary differences? The short answer is yes, and it's needed because, for example, in engineering, the emphasis is not so much on academic writing, while in humanities it would be. So certain forms of AI use should be allowed in different faculties, not only in faculties, in disciplines, and it differs from lecturer to lecturer. So there should be a lot of flexibility with these guidelines and policies. But we can ask then the question, why then guidelines and policy if it's so open or flexible? So I think in a previous discussion, we already realized in South Africa, we don't have a university yet to have an AI policy. I looked into it, and I will be glad if somebody correct me, but there's no university yet. At Northwest, we have a framework policy, and hopefully by middle November, we will have a policy approved by council. And only half of the universities in South Africa have guidelines, which is quite, I must say, weird, because we need these guidelines and policies. Perhaps we can ask, why a policy? Is it really needed? Will it solve the problems of AI? And I thought about that because I've put a lot of effort in developing our policy now and have a lot of consultation about it. So I looked at other policies at Northwest and asked, why are those needed? And there's a policy that I thought about. Now, of course, the example is not fair in a way, not fully applicable. But if you think about the sexual harassment policy, some universities have them. Why do they have them? What role do they fulfill? If you have a sexual harassment policy, it does not take away sexual harassment or solve the problem at the university, but it does give some guidelines how to deal with it in that institution. Who's responsible? How should they report it? Where should it go? What is our stance? So in that sense, a policy is crucial to point out who's the responsible person. Where's the office where these things are centralized? Where is it coordinated? And of course, such a policy cannot be described in too much detail. There should be an openness for interpretation. It should link with other policies that's already in place, codes of conduct, behavioral policies, things like that. And the same for AI policy. We need a policy to bring everything together. Guidelines are good. Most universities worldwide have guidelines, but guidelines, the implementation of it, the revision of it, who's dealing with it? The teaching learning office, the research one, is it at IT? So with a policy, you can easily get these things together and ensure that there's enough differences for faculties, lecturers, but also enough coherence to guide the university in a certain direction. If you allow me, I'm talking quick and fast, Martin, but I do want to share my screen quickly. Is that fine?
Yeah, go ahead. Not a problem.
Just to show you what we have, can you see the policy now?
Yes.
On my screen. I know it's small, but this is how our policy looked like that we have to approve now in middle November. And you will see the policy statement basically say that we want to guide the human-centeredness, ethical, sustainable, lawful, effective use, also the risk, everything of AI. So this is what the policy must do. And it's short. We cannot go too long in our AI policy. It's basically principles. But what's important for me, it indicates the role and responsibility of people, how to implement and make this policy or the AI governance at the university practical. That there's not sort of contradiction between different departments. You will see that I highlighted it here. We leave specific openness for differences between faculties, between lecturers. But again, that should be guided within the policy. And what I want to lastly just indicate, we have a AI hub at Northwest University. That's sort of the hands and feet of the policy. Otherwise, the policy will just go to the shelf and gather dust. And we have an AI steering committee who's driving the policy. We have IT rules on the use of AI. And all these stakeholders come together to talk about these policies and guidelines in relation to our academic integrity policy and how we deal with the practical issues of AI responsible and ethical use. And how can we really have an educative approach if it comes to the ethical, responsible use of AI.
Anné, I'm going to pause you there. Thank you. Natural pause. Selah. Sukaina, how would you respond?
Thank you. So I'm going to build a bit on what Anné has said because there's a lot of resonance between, I think, some of our approaches. So I mentioned the framework earlier and the rationale for it. And I think the framework has happened relatively recently, but early on from 23, we recognized that different stakeholders need different guidelines and entry points into the work of AI. So we did develop complementary guidelines, I suppose, so specific guides, a teaching and learning guide for academic staff, assessment guide, prompting guide, a researcher's guide, and a student guide. And I did post the link earlier, and these are Creative Commons, and people can reuse them. And I think they're not hierarchical, so it sort of answers your question that that we do need to think about differential needs and creating space for further disciplinary specific discussion and adaptations. But I think maybe one way of thinking about it is to take an ecosystem approach to responding to generative AI. And so we have, and I suppose maybe the story is that we had these guidelines from 2023. I see Nicola says, they need updating and so on. We've been updating, and she's right, that the field moves so quickly. What we said at the beginning of 2023 looks a bit naive in 2024, maybe. So we've been updating the guidelines every 3 to 6 months. We have a team doing that and so on. But then the guidelines are not enough, which is why we went towards the framework. And I think that's what Anné is referring to. And it's about messaging that it's not the responsibility of one individual somewhere or a student. It's the whole university ecosystem that needs to be supportive around transitioning into whatever world we're going into. And so in the framework, for example, we've mapped out how different actors across the institution need to operate: executive leadership, the committees that are responsible, the support departments, faculties and departments themselves, even down to teaching and learning committees, and what their roles are. And then individual teaching staff is support teaching, and students. And we did that by going to each of these stakeholders and saying, what is your responsibility? What are you willing to sign up for in this framework? We've got the guidelines, but they're just the start. They are, take this as a guideline in itself, but we needed something stronger. And I think that's where we thought we needed this framework. And what we also do in the framework is then say, well, there's no one size fits all. And we explicitly state that disciplines need to take ownership and agency over what generative AI means for their field, for what they teach, what is going to be in the future curriculum, and therefore how assessment needs to be changed, or not really how assessment needs to be changed. How do you now assess? What are defendable decisions that you can make about assessment, given the fact that we know that students will be using generative AI? Of course, we can secure certain assessments, and we have, where it's absolutely crucial that students develop particular foundational skills, that they are in a situation invigilated and observable, and so on. All of those things are in play. But I think what we have absolutely said is that, yes, disciplinary differences, it would be nonsensical to have a policy for AI, just as it would be for internet or social media that is just a blanket. So it really is important to start delineating the different stakeholders and the different disciplines, so it cuts in various different ways. And so I suppose the challenge, though, and again, I keep coming back to there's possibly no happy ending here. There's lots of productive tensions and more questions coming out. We need enough consistency in our institution approaches to maintain, say, institutional standards around academic integrity. So we can say things like secure your assessments for a particular, maybe for lower, for sort of the undergraduate, first years. But we also need enough flexibility for disciplines to determine appropriate use within the pedagogical context. And I think that's really the conversation going forward. And in terms of, we already have academic misconduct policy and assessment policy. So in a sense, we should not be reinventing the wheel with new policies. We need to look at what our existing policies already have and then adapt or adjust accordingly. So I think that's really how I would respond to that particular question. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Olalekan, how would you respond and share a little bit about the inner workings over at NPU?
Okay, thank you. So I would say our guidelines fit together, which means that we use a tiered framework, a single institution-wide set of principles. Then we have role-specific guidance for staff, including our researchers. And for students, we have other ones with course and discipline level rules, which are set by lecturers where appropriate. So institutional-wide umbrella, we have general guidelines that apply to academics, students, management, and non-academic staff. And these general guidelines spelled out the core principles, which are fairness, accountability, transparency, privacy, and robustness. We also have staff and researchers guidelines separate, which cover chain research, administration, and communication. And this guideline requires disclosure, authorship clarity to ensure that AI is not the author, and also verification of finding before publication. And then we have student guidelines, which is basically for undergraduate and postgraduate. So what the student guidelines does is that it emphasizes academic integrity. Also lecturer level permission are emphasized for each assessment. Proper citation is required where the use of generative AI is enabled. And also, it must be POPIA aligned privacy. Now, the question is, who owns the policy? Formally, I would say the framework of the guideline. Formally, the owner is the DVC Teaching and Learning, and also MANCO, which is Management Committee of the institution, as well as the CIO Act Compliance Officers, with consultation via MANCO. So we have AI subcommittee within the Senate, and that keeps the governance central while implementation is local. So where the difference is allowed is that our baseline is basically consistent, which is disclose use, protect privacy, ensure fairness, keep human in the loop. But we permit local variation by task and disciplines. Also, we allowed our lecturers to set where and how Gen AI is allowed for specific assignment, especially in technical modules like software development and all those. We allow our students to engage in what we call vibe coding via generative AI, but where they do that, they need to cite that this was done using these. Otherwise, if they ask questions and they are unable to answer how that was done, that's a challenge. So basically, our Gen AI policy is tiered. We have a single institution-wide set of policies or principles that applies to everyone, and each also have practical guidance. And also, like I said, lecturers set task level rules to reflect on disciplinary norms. So governance, as I said, sits with the DVC, teaching and learning, with MANCO and CIO acting as oversight. So whatever the discipline is, the constant are the same. As I said, just make sure that you disclose the use, you protect privacy, and you avoid bias. And above all, make sure that you keep human accountability. Human must be kept in the loop. So we back this
Olalekan,
up with a standard disclosure.
I'm gonna stop you there. Thank you for that. Nicola. Have we got you? Oh, there you are.
Yes, I'm here.
Thanks.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, disciplinary cultures and the relationship between these guidelines, I think for us lecturers are encouraged to use the guides, to think about, not to see them as generic, but rather what does appropriate use look like within a specific disciplines, and to include an AI statement in their course outlines that speaks to appropriate uses of Gen AI and how these support disciplinary knowledge building, or even how particular uses might undermine that, where lecturers might want to discourage particular uses. This is also, something that I think with across whether it's postgrads, students or researchers, I think what is common across these is around evaluative judgment and epistemic access. So for students, postgrads, to achieve epistemic access involves internalizing the standards and ways of knowing in their discipline. Often, and this is about the ways of being an academic. Often we see AI statements in particular journals where they're making that explicit around how you can use AI in your research articles. But we see the capacity to judge the validity of an AI response as crucial. and that can only really be developed through a strong foundation of interdisciplinary knowledge. So yes, and we do encourage that as part of discipline-specific practices. So for example, colleagues in law note how, often Gen AI tools tend to hallucinate a lot in the South African legal context because of a lack of data, and some other fields as well. So it's really important that whether you're a student, lecturer, researcher, that you verify AI outputs and so it goes and develop that evaluative judgment. So it's not all about learning about your specific discipline's Gen AI practices. And in a way, it's not often, not just within a discipline, or department. It could be, particular fields where these norms are emerging. Yeah.
Thank you, Nicola. Oh, okay, and that's a full house. So we're going to do one more round, and it is now 3 of us. So I'm going to, for the first time in the series, take up my stopwatch and give speakers 2 minutes each to do the following, and that is to reflect on what has worked particularly well or what has gone badly wrong. Again, we're among friends. The formal way that I want to say this is, can you share some learnings or challenges, or ideally both, regarding generative AI, the guidelines or the policies as it relates to research integrity, research use? This is reflecting the questions I see in our hosts. I briefly saw a question by Jennifer Watermeyer about this thing is what works well and what hasn't, and let's put that out as sharpish as possible so that we can get some engagement from the panelists among one another, and then from the audience as well. Can we go back to you, Nicola? Is that okay? You were last, now you're first. What has worked well, or what has worked quite badly?
I think what is working really well is the commitment to ongoing conversations with both staff and students. I mean, we've been doing a lot of stuff informally, discussions in residences, conversations with academics. It doesn't even have to always be that workshop, but it's important to, I think, build trust through those ongoing conversations, and that feeds back into updating our guidelines to make sure they're relevant and effective. We've also been doing a students as partners approach to revising our guidelines, and I think this is something that I see across universities, people using this student as partners approach. I think that's been going really, I mean, that's got a lot of potential. I think across institutions, what I see is willingness to share. As mentioned, part of a number of professional organizations and networks, part of the digital learning and teaching team in Haltasa. So I'm the lead for that team, and then also involved with the USAF digital education, learning and teaching community of practice. And I can share a link to that site that's got a wonderful collection of OERs that all the colleagues here, a lot of fellow panelists have contributed to. So I think that's working well. We're not starting from scratch. We can learn from each other, and that is happening in these organizations.
Super. And that is 1 minute 30 seconds. Amazing. Thank you, Nicola. Olalekan, what has worked well and what is not working well? What's going wrong at MPU with regards to AI policy?
Okay, so what is working well for us is basically, I would say we have one umbrella, many playbooks, where we have a single institutional frame, we have which gives the same North Star, why role-specific guidelines tell staff and researchers and students exactly what to do. Human accountability stays central. Privacy first, we know that, and skills and support matter. We have regular workshops, especially on how our students will perform, on ourselves to perform prompting. The challenges that we have, where the friction is basically hallucination and overtrust. So assessment gray zone, threshold trackers, and task-by-task permission, which can confuse how we handle them. Data handling traps, bias and fairness, the policy commitment to just. Those are some of the challenges. So the specific observation that we have is that research integrity, which is authorship clarity, documentation trail. So whereby we make sure that staff must keep clear record of what they do. So this is basically, we believe this is part of a scholarly, good scholarly hygiene. Thank you. Over to you.
Thanks, Olalekan. I appreciate that. Phindiwe, over at Unisa, what has worked well and what hasn't worked well?
I think the showcases have definitely had some positives amongst academics, where we illustrate and demonstrate the various tools, how to utilize them for visualizations. Our AI policy and guidelines, unfortunately, it's still under Senate review for approval. And because it has not been widely distributed, then we're finding that there's still a lot of confusion amongst both academics and students as to how to utilize these tools effectively. But one of the positives, we do subscribe our students to the writing tools. We use Open Writeful. We also have integrated Kinosis within our Word tool, so that students can then advance their research utilizing this tool. There's a lot of fear, I think. You also seen this in social media. I follow students a lot, and you see them lamenting AI outcome, right? As if an AI outcome is a bad thing. While we understand, and I think maybe at the beginning when these tools got introduced, there was a lot of hallucination involved. And it has then generated mistrust and lesser utilization of it. You would see, especially with the older academics also, we struggling with the punitive approach, where you do see those elements of AI usage. We still utilize Turnitin, and we know that even with Turnitin and other detective tools, there are false positives that are identified, and that becomes a problematic disciplinary matter, where we find there is a high increases of disciplinary cases through the recognition of these tools. So there's still quite a lot of work that we still need to do from an educational perspective, but I think the showcases, the webinars have assisted us in ensuring that colleges and stakeholders are aware of the positives of these.
That's 2 minutes and lovely. Thank you so much. Sukaina.
Thank you. So I think what I would probably start saying maybe is that frameworks, policies are probably necessary, but not sufficient, from where we're sitting. They're helping to start conversations, which is great. They legitimize certain initiatives, provide institutional backing. You can see the gaps and advocate for resources. But I think the real work happens in the messy middle of implementation and contestation. And I think that's where we're at. So it's, we're in the midst of this right now. And I think maybe it's both something that is a positive and a negative is to let go of certainty here. We're used to having answers, clear policies, established practices, reliable assessment methods. But with generative AI, the more we find out, the more we unearth practices, how students are using them. We're operating in genuine uncertainty. I think we don't know if a student has used AI unless you're actually watching them. We can't agree on what appropriate use means possibly yet, because we haven't had enough time to get our heads around it. We're still redesigning assessments while the technology is evolving. So I think that's one of the, it's both the balancing act of dealing with uncertainty, and that can be a negative for some people, a positive for others. So I would say that one of the things that has worked well, I suppose, is that we've tried to shift it away from academic misconduct and AI use and students and cheaters and that, away from that narrative. Not sure we're fully there yet, but because we have an innovation pillar, we have had a really great response to our AI Teaching Innovation Grants call. We've said, here is money, apply for it. And we had a great response for people saying, well, actually, maybe I am interested in seeing what I can do for my students in my course using AI. So we've got people building chatbots, people experimenting with marking and grading, and so on. And we've done that without like trying to keep away from vendors, and saying this is a vendor, because that's also the other environment. I think these tools are showing up in all of our technologies without us asking for them. And I think the challenge is, as universities, we need to control the narrative around the use of AI in particular tools. So I think that for us, that has worked well, because we're trying to genuinely surface use cases from the bottom up, rather than the narrative of larger vendors saying, well, AI will solve all your grading and marking problems, because that is also quite a dangerous narrative. So I'll stop there. But that's really top of mind at the moment. Thanks.
Most helpful. Anné.
Yes, thank you, Martin. So what worked well? I think something definitely unique of Northwest University is that we established the AI Hub in the beginning of this year. And it wasn't my initiative, although I'm the director now of the AI Hub, but it works well. Suddenly there's a central office where anybody at the university can ask for help, where there's coordination taking place, where I can sit on different forums, communicate. We have our own website. So it's really helpful to have a centralized place for teaching, learning, research, and all other possible AI application in admin or finance or wherever at the AI Hub. Our guidelines, I think, took a lot of effort, but we have that in place and it works well. We're really open to revise it often. That will be part of the nature of it. I think our educative approach to using AI for the students and our integrity system works really well. If somebody's reported for irresponsible use of AI, say the example was mentioned by Nicola that fake sources were used or something, we see that students don't, after doing remedial courses, don't make the same mistakes again. We train them to use AI more responsibly. We also had a lot of training. We developed 2 courses at Northwest, one for students. We call it AI for Academic and Career Success, a 2-hour online course, which is working really well. We get good feedback from students. And we had a course now for changing assessments, AI and assessments, where we taught now in 10 workshops about 600 lecturers, a day-long lecturer, how to change their assessments and integrate AI. We don't want to police the use of AI. We rather want to integrate it and change our assessments that allow students to use AI, but also allow lecturers to feel confident that there's learning taking place. What's not working well? Of course, everything is not perfect. I think we struggle for a lot of things, and it's not in a specific order, but the digital divide is still a reality. We have really poor students that don't have access to these devices that some wealthy students have. Even the example Phindiwe mentioned about Gemini Pro that Google made available, that's for free for students. That's just a catch. You need to register with your credit card before you can use it for a year. How many students have a credit card? And after a year, you will have to start to pay. So we don't have that yet. The second difficult thing is that the problem from teaching learning moved now to the postgraduate research domain. We struggle there with supervisors that's unsure, postgraduate students that are unsure, examiners that are unsure. So there's a lot of work there to be done. And I think that's our new focus for the new year, to see what we can do there. So that's in short. I think we also struggle like other universities. Not everybody is buying in and using AI effectively, but we're trying with training. Thanks, Martin.
Anné, thank you for that. Anné, I'm going to ask you, have you got a question for any of the other panelists, but I'm going to ask you to make it specific. I know initially we said we might have sort of what do you guys think questions, but our engagement is long, and I really want the questions from the floor to be addressed as well. So is there something specific that you want to ask someone?
Oh, but these are just for curiosity, so you can decide if it's good enough to ask.
It will be, I'm sure.
I would like to note two things. What are other universities doing about the digital divide in terms of making AI tools available for all students? And also, what are the experience at other universities of not having a central office or place? Or because I hear there's some contradictory sort of approaches and even competition, developing AI courses, who should take responsibility. So because it's working so well with us, I'm just wondering how other universities are coping with that.
Okay, we lots to deal with there. Before anyone answers, Nicola, what question would you like to throw into the mix? Anné has violated my diktat here, but nonetheless, is it possible to direct it at someone? If not, then that's fine. We make it a general question.
Yeah, I guess just to say around funding, because so far, to my knowledge, maybe other colleagues are aware of our national software consortiums funding particular AI tools, making across university deals that can benefit all of us, because we know a lot of the really good bespoke tools. I mean, Feedback Fruits, Mindjoy, just some of them that I know of and have experience of are really, really expensive. And our current university budgets, it comes as a shock to them when they see the prices associated with these. So yeah, if you know anything of software consortiums and how you're dealing with the increased cost of the tools that you want to implement.
That's a great question. Olalekan, if you had a question to your fellow panelists, what would it be? Or to someone in specific? Sorry, I should say that.
I think the question that I would have asked is basically what somebody had actually asked in the panel. I can't remember the person or the question, which says which asks us to look into our view on how AI is impacting South Africa differently from the country, because what do we think we can do on this thing? Because I think it is high time we start looking for African solutions to African problems. So as a result of this, how can we all come together as an institution under the umbrella of South African universities, and then work together on one project that can actually benefit the entire South African society in terms of AI? How can we, where can we get this data? Because we have a lot of data in Africa, but I think the challenge that we have is that we still don't know how to mine it for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Phindiwe, what question would you ask of a fellow panelist?
I think to Sukaina, because they had taken the decision of disabling their AI detective tools, just on its impact now on how they are measuring integrity and equity and learning outcomes, given that aspect. I think it's one of the challenges that we are confronted with overutilization of AI tools, and it would be interesting to find out from her and other panelists as to how are they then measuring its impact and its effect on academic integrity.
Lovely, thank you. Thanks for that. Sukaina, your question?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm interested from fellow panelists. So we're thinking of, we're not thinking, we're rolling out mandatory AI literacies training for students. And I wondered if the panelists had any experience of what that might look like. It's not something that we have done before in rolling out anything mandatory.
That's fantastic. Okay, now what I think we do, since it is 20 past, instead of just an open engagement, because then we're going to be here, is we allow questions from, and Louisa would need to check with you and with the technical team at ASSAf. Is that possible? Can we actually allow participants to ask questions? Is it going to block us if we do that? Not sure if that is. No, we know it's possible because we had an earlier comment, right? But somebody had a hand up. So we've got a whole bunch of questions in the Q&A. I've seen that some of the panelists have been answering them. We've got these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions, and then we're starting to open this to the floor now. So we've got a question around how does it work if you don't have a central office? Do we see that it is a bit of a bun fight between different institutional bodies or not? Number one. Number two, how do we deal with the digital divide and the fact that we have students with no resources coming into university and expected to perform like those who do in many cases. We've got a great question about the funding and software and what consortiums are there, what opportunities are there. We've had the question about what makes South Africa different, or what are the commonalities with other African countries or other countries elsewhere. We've had a question about how well does compulsory AI training work, and how would we measure the success? So do people do it, and can you actually measure outcomes? And maybe the rider to that is, how well do AI proctoring tools work? Let's forget about differences of sort of philosophical stance, but do they actually work? Let's maybe start there. Any one of the panelists want to take any question? I won't call on anyone. Please, yes, go ahead, Phindiwe.
If I may then take the one that was asked about mandatory AI literacy, because we rolled it out for our students. I think that works very well, because the students that have subsequently found themselves in the disciplinary office have then stated that post doing the course, it has assisted them in identifying that ethical utilization of AI. So I think it will be a good response for UCT. The challenge that I still foresee is that the opportunity still is there for misuse of the AI tools, and then how do we then prevent that? I must say, from our side, based on the tool that we have developed with our professors within the College of Science and Engineering, we have successfully managed to block out these nefarious AI tools that screen reads the student page and answer on the student's behalf. So we are assured that we are strengthening the ability of the proctoring tool and utilizing a second camera for AI algorithms to assess the student behavior. Then we'll be able to be assured that with informal examinations that is the student, and that student didn't partake in utilization of AI. But I do agree with Sukaina that the mandatory course, it does provide the benefits that they would want to see from a student heightened level of awareness. Thanks.
Fantastic. So we've had comments on AI proctoring and a little bit about AI sort of training. Does anyone want to comment on the digital divide, maybe on what makes South Africa different? Or similar? And then, okay,
I
nice.
can
So you've
have a go.
unmuted. Yes, go ahead. Yes.
So maybe also Nicola's question as well around software, because I think it's a little bit related. So, I mean, I totally agree. We, at the South African universities, we don't have the dollars and the pounds to pay heavy licensing fees for tools that, are quite new, maybe not tested, not evaluated. So I mean, our approach is to use what we have. So, I mean, we have Microsoft, so we're rolling out or letting people about Copilot chat. It comes with our subscription and it's in a safe sort of data environment. It may not be, what everybody is used to. People are using bring your own eye all over the place, your own AI, ChatGPT and Claude and so on. But we are trying to at least offer a baseline set of AI capabilities based on what we have at the moment in the institution and also within what our learning management system offers. And these things are showing up. But it's not a, long term. It could lead to a sort of digital divide between universities in South Africa and universities elsewhere, where having access to these tools is a kind of, like a perk or some students, globally have access to, particular types of tools. So I think it is actually a real concern. So I'm not, but at the moment, at least we're sort of looking at actually what we have in our environment and how we can make best use of it. In terms of whether South African universities, whether things are different, I mean, that's a multi-layered question. Maybe one example is that, I was running an assessment discussion forum and somebody from our African Feminist Studies department said they're actually using the large language models in teaching because the African feminine is not very well represented in the data. So they actually can use it in a way to critique large language models because it shows what is not in there and what is not representative. So they're using it as an example in curriculum around, epistemic access and so on. So there's sort of examples around awareness of what is in the data, what it's been trained on. And that we found other use cases where, epistemologies that have emanated from our context are not well represented, and that's actually being used in a positive way. Maybe that's a small example, but these are multi-purpose technologies, and the use cases and what you can build on them are quite extensive. So I think it's quite differentiated. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a lovely nuance there. I want to ask if it's possible to Natalie Swanepoel in the audience. Sorry that I'm calling on you like this. Would you be comfortable to unmute and ask your question? Otherwise, I'll do it. I'm happy to do it. Sorry, Natalie, you might have stepped away to make a cup of tea. Okay, so I want to put this to the two panelists. What Natalie's saying is we're asking the wrong question. We shouldn't be using LLMs at all. There's an ethical, well, maybe I'm caricaturing this, so I should apologize in advance, but she's saying, hold on, large language models are trained on stolen data. There is a massive environmental harm in terms of energy use, in terms of water use. There are these biases baked in because of the data that it's trained on. And it is producing AI slop and a whole bunch of other nefarious things. Are we sweeping that under the rug? Who wants to respond to that?
I do not think we sweeping that under the blood. But remember, when we're talking about the data that the large language models are trained about, or on, rather, those are data that are in the public domain. Majority of them are data that are in the public domain. And I think I made a suggestion in one of the articles that I wrote that there's also in one of the webinars that I've participated in, which is I can't remember, one of the book publishing company. I made a suggestion that government in every country needs to start regulating the use of artificial intelligence, which will include generative AI, just like they've regulated the use of social media. Without that, if it's like in a society where there's no law, nobody can be accused of being sinner, So if government starts regulating AI, then one of the things that government needs to do is to ensure that the data that the large language model are trained upon, consent are given before they can use such data. Otherwise, there could be consequences. Just like South Africa has come up with POPIA, just like the Europe has come up with GDPR, just like America has come up with IPA and all those things. So I think the bulk of the work is going to be on the government. They've regulated social media, they've regulated cryptocurrency, they've regulated banking. I think it's high time the government of every country starts regulating the use of artificial intelligence and how data that are trained on large language models are being used. And there's no big deal if South Africa take the front seat. We can do it before America even, and that will make us to be a strong country, because in terms of artificial intelligence research, I think in Africa, South Africa is doing well more than other countries in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we still have a question around the digital divide. Sukaina said something about that. We still have this open issue around South Africa. Is it different, and what opportunities there are? We've made some gestures towards that, but I want to go back to Sukaina and ask two questions about the UCT approach that you are spearheading. The one is, can you give us guidance? How do you respond to the Unisa idea of making AI literacy or AI literacies training compulsory? Is that something that you're moving towards and will be implementing? And maybe just on the one side, on the other side, maybe just give us a bit more information about the idea of the AI innovation grant. Is that specifically to lecturers, and is the idea to spur sort of creative ideas or best practices, or is that something else entirely?
Thanks. So yes, the mandatory capabilities training for AI for students, we actually have it in the framework, and we are ideating how best to roll that out. So I was just looking for ideas, but it's likely. So we already have AI training for students in our learning management system, but at the moment it's voluntary and they're encouraged to go and do it, and it's self-paced. So yeah, that's very helpful. I think it's just something that we want to really discuss, how disciplinary specific it needs to be, whether it's sufficient to have a kind of baseline level of AI literacies that looks at some core issues around what AI is, how to use it, prompting, and so on, so that all students, when they come in at orientation, then they have a refresher. So yes, that's on the roadmap. And maybe students won't be able to take final exams unless they've done it or something. So we need some carrot and stick approaches to that. And then the AI innovation grants, I'm just going to pop a link into the chat. But yes, we managed to secure some funds through the DVC Teaching and Learning at the end of last year. And we put out a call to the entire teaching community. So it was academic staff who support teaching, and said, think about how you might use AI for a teaching and learning problem. And we sent it out, and we got a really great response. We had a committee who evaluated the proposals, and we're actually using it as both an incentive to encourage people. So, because we've got a whole range of people interested, but you also need to support the early adopters in your institution to encourage people who actually want to be on the edge and who want to try things out. And possibly fail, and so on. And we want to really kind of get the nuances. What does it mean if you are going to do some AI assisted grading with human oversight? What does that actually look like? Should you, what are the ethical issues you look at? Should you tell your students? At what point do your students know? I mean, we think yes to all of those. And so what we're also doing is we're monitoring these grants quite carefully. They're invited to come and speak to us, to share their challenges. So it's a very safe safe space for people to say, actually, I don't think that worked very well, or I'm having real challenges with this. And we've got 14 of those across the institution, different use cases. We're also discovering what it takes for staff to say, build a bot, do vibe coding, what tools work for them. So we were tool agnostic. We said, use whatever you like, we'll pay for the license. We wanted a broad range of things. And it's been a lovely sort of generative kind of space for people who really just want to experiment and ideate and innovate. And we've set up a supportive infrastructure, not without its problems. It sometimes butts up against some existing practices within departments, and there's negotiation, but it is the messy work. But it's also, I think, advice is to also gather enough people around who want to push the edge a bit as well here, so that we're ready for when things come, so that we don't have to take everything from the north or from vendors, that we build our own capabilities in the innovation space as well, so that we're not just users and consumers, but also builders and people who can imagine around teaching and learning. And we're interested particularly in things that are important to our context, such as supporting multilingualism, curriculum change, epistemic access, those things that are very important to institutional mission. And that's what we asked people to think about when they put in their proposals. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking at one of the questions in the Q&A there. So I put it to you in a very practical sense, colleagues. Is anyone? It now sounds as if I'm saying, is anyone still listening to jazz? But is anyone still? And I don't mean it in a pejorative way. Is anyone using AI detection tools? And then specifically, I think to Anné and to Nicola, who both emphasized the idea of a restorative approach. To say a little bit more about that, and I have heard sort of stories about how lecturers would be called out for having used it, or researchers rather, and then go through some sort of restorative approach and have that with quite a happy ending, but you'd rather have it from the horse's mouth than from me. So anything about from any one of our panelists, are you using detection tools? Why are you using, and is it working? And then maybe something from Nicola or Anné about the restorative approach, and in practical terms, how does that actually work? How do you restore somebody?
Martin, can I say something?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just two comments. The energy usage is high. I just want to go back to that. The energy use is immensely high. That, however, will lead to new kinds of computers based on biology, and I don't want to say much about that, but these are being developed at the moment at Microsoft and others, which will be far less energy intensive. The second thing that I think we need to consider is with digitization, and we talk about the digital divide, but that's a temporary thing. In the future, what will happen with digitization in higher education? It will do two things. It will demonetize higher education, and it will democratize higher education. And I think those are two very positive things that will happen at school level, but also in higher education. I have absolutely no doubt about that. And we as universities need to prepare ourselves to lead that way. Otherwise, we will find private institutions, even individuals, setting up their own learning and teaching programs, and all they need to do really is to get accreditation of what they offer. So just those two comments quickly on the energy usage and also on the positive effects of digitization. In terms of assessment, if we have to check whether someone has used AI to answer the question, and if we worry about that, we are asking the wrong question. We should be asking ourselves, what are the questions that we are asking? If it's purely about memory, if we go to the lower cognitive levels, according to Bloom's taxonomy, then we're asking the right questions, the wrong question. So my point of view here is that the first thing we should ask ourselves, what is the kind of question that we are asking? Because then it becomes irrelevant whether someone is using a library, Google, AI, or any other tool for that matter. Thank you.
Thank you. That's lovely. I much appreciate that. Thank you, Eugene.
Can I come
Anné,
in?
yes.
Go
Martin,
ahead.
to your question? Is that fine about the
Yes,
AI
please.
detection
Yes,
tools?
go ahead. Yeah.
Let me just say to Professor Cloete quickly, I agree with his last statement that if you have to see detect if AI was used, you asked the wrong question. But it's extremely difficult with AI tools that develop so quickly, so fast, to ask a question that AI cannot answer in a way, even if you keep all the Bloom's taxonomy levels in play. So I think 6 months ago or a year ago, you could have asked, I remember last year this time we had some questions you can ask, and AI will not be able to answer it. Now it's impossible. If you have any assignment given as a takeaway or something that students have to do at home, like research for PhD or master, they will have access to AI that will be able to answer it. How good it is, that's the question. If it has verified the sources, I see you nod your head, Prof. Cloete, so I'm glad about that. So there's the skills I think we need to train students. And of course, we struggle to train and help or assist lecturers to develop new assessment, ways of assessment, ways of learning. That's what I hear from Sukaina as well, that we all try to change our assessment to move away from detection tools. I think that is what we want to do because it's contentious. It's a negative way of dealing with AI to try to catch students who use it. But at Northwest University, we do use it. We do use it as a secondary or ancillary tool in detecting irresponsible use of AI, because that's still something we have to deal with. That sometimes a lecturer will say you may not use AI, and then we get AI tools being used. We see it with the prompts, even in the answer, or we see it with fake sources. Or sometimes we put the Trojan horse into the assessment, and then we see the results of that. So what we do, we use detection tools, and we use in a secondary manner. And if we detect that students use it irresponsibly, in other words, they depended too much on it, or they didn't declare it, something like that, we engage in an educative manner. And I think that's what's critically important with detection tools, that it should not be used in a punitive way, that it's immediately a disciplinary, as if this is the final proof, definitive proof that somebody used AI. We rather see that it can help to flag sometimes irresponsible use if you have a detection tool. Take, for example, I can compare it with a medical doctor who has to make a diagnosis of his patient. So he uses different tests. He will see the patient look pale or this, so he can say, yes, I think you have this disease. But you can use a blood test, for example, and that blood test can be, say, 95% accurate. So why not use that to also confirm if there's some problem here, that it can be flagged. And then if the blood tests come back, you can say, yes, so we have this test. I know it's only 95%. So let's look now deeper into your symptoms and what the possible problem can be to help the patient to have a better diagnosis. So it's not to punish the students that we use detection tools, but we do want to flag that there might be a problem with some assignments. And then the lecturer will have to go and look and see, yes, there are sources here that doesn't fit it at all, or there's definitely prompts in it. We need to acknowledge that there's false positives sometimes. I must also add on that point, we had about, in the last few years, I think at least 3,000 students reported for the irresponsible use of AI, and not one of them, they have an appeal option, not one of them was a false positive. But we don't know how many was false negatives, so how many students got away with it, you see. So the detection tools are not the answer, but if we move away too quickly, and this is my last sentence. If we move away too quickly from detection tools, we put a huge responsibility on the shoulders of lecturers that might miss potential misuse, irresponsible use of AI. And while we're searching for alternatives, while we're changing our assessments to get away from a policing culture, I think it's still needed to use these tools. Yeah,
Anné,
in a combination. And this,
sorry
I think
that I'm
it will
cutting
take
you.
time to move fully away.
Sorry that I'm
Thank you,
cutting you there.
Martin.
That's a very long last sentence. Olalekan, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I just basically wanted to say, I wanted to support what Professor Cloete said. And I think as academics and researchers, we need to start moving towards application in our teaching rather than theory. Because basically the AI has come to stay. There's nothing we can do to it. It has come to become part of us. So we've got to find a way of integrating it into our academics. So we've got to find a way of using it for the benefit of the academic society and the society at large. Irrespective of how we want to, that's why we said it's important, whether it is late now for government to regulate the use of AI or not, but it is important at least for the regulation to come in place so that we know there's a difference between guideline and policy. So guideline is just we say this is how you must use it. If it hasn't become policy, it's difficult to discipline anybody that is caught using AI. So I think we just need to find a way of integrate AI into academic curricula in South Africa and in Africa at large. Because otherwise, if we do not, we are going to find ourselves behind, far behind what the West and the Europes are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any one of the panelists who wants to have a final 1 minute before I close out? If there's something burning, please. Oh, Nicola, go ahead.
Yes, big burning one, and I think we need to make more of it, is how this previous, and I think it's still something that's playing out in many of our institutions, is this punitive approach. And, around detection, many spaces, they say, oh, but it's to have a conversation with students. But in actual fact, it really has damaged the relationship of trust between lecturers and students. So going forward, it's like, how do we get students to use AI in critical and discipline-specific ways, but also repair that trust that we see is so broken. I mean, we ran a survey with students, and when you have any other comments, so many of them said, well, this is what happened to me. And one person even mentioned suicidal ideation. So this is a real big issue. And I think we've got to, as much as we love technology and want to focus on that, it's really important to foster community building and long-term relationships, trust, and to try and really actively seek to repair the harms that have been done.
Thank you for that intervention, Nicola. Colleagues, I'm going to close out and then return the floor to our colleagues from ASSAf. I hope that this is not an abuse of power, but I will not summarize as much as provide a few comments. Firstly, I think we should acknowledge that we have literacy and we've got digital literacy built on that, and then this idea of critical AI literacies. And we're in a country and in a continent, but specifically in a country where we struggle with literacy. So there are these wonderful opportunities that will come, and the university will change in many ways. But I think as a baseline acknowledgement, if we can't fix literacy, if we can't fix primary school education, then we're going to have a very hard time of it. A second point to make is that we should acknowledge that, yes, there is value in saying that if AI can answer it, it is the wrong question, but that's not always a good way to think about it. And the reason is knowledge builds. So we do need to do the basics first. And AI can do that. So I have a young boy and a young son, and he everything he does can be done by AI, and it's good that he does these things because they are foundational. So as we go through the processes, yes, there might be the calculator analogy that is a bit problematic. We're all familiar with that. But you do your long division, and once you can do long division, then you're allowed to take out the calculator and use it. So I think if we are to be developing critical thinkers, it's asking the wrong question to always say that if AI can do it, we do the wrong thing. Okay, we've had a fantastic smorgasbord. We've had how to change assessments. We've had pro-Turnitin and anti-Turnitin. We've had let's go vibe coding, and we've had let's hold back on that. We've had let's implement remedial courses, and let's have mandatory AI literacy for our students, towards which I'm leaning. It was interesting for me to note let's call it the ideological leaning, the assumption, are humans good or are humans inherently flawed and they'll take shortcuts, that we've seen between universities, and obviously these have historical inertia that they had. We had examples of some lighter touch and some not necessarily heavier handed, but definitely more proactive dealing. We've had interesting nuances between guidelines and frameworks. And of course, the very strong point that was made that students need clarity. So we can have guidelines and we can have frameworks, but students want clarity. And if I may add my 2 cents to that, is what I'm advocating in the WITS sense, and WITS was left out by design from this one, is to have 4 different modules so that the university has 3 positions. There's a university position. Each faculty has a strategy, and within the schools, the various modules have what I'm advocating, a traffic light system. So red, we don't use it at all because this is foundational knowledge. So we use proctored exams, or we switch it off, or whatever. Orange is that there's some use, and then green, we embrace it. And that depends on where we are in Bloom's taxonomy. It depends on what the skills are of the students, but to have that sort of flexibility. My final appeal to everyone here, to the universities, to the members of ASSAf, is that we share our resources, we share our policies, we share our motivations, so that we understand where we come from and that we support each other in our academic ecosystem. And on that note, a great thank you to ASSAf, which has been championing these debates and these engagements. And I turn it over to Louise Veldsman. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Martin. And I think you had a slip of a tongue there. So it's Susan Veldsman. Good afternoon.
Oh, sorry, Susan.
It's okay. So such a lot of people actually, get confused between the 2 of them. We've been working together forever. So thank you very much, Martin, for so eloquently guiding us through this discussion this afternoon. I don't think I have a very easy task to wrap up such a sort of dynamic webinar that we had this afternoon. Absolutely fascinating, etc. And I really want to applaud our speakers for being so honest and to allow us to have an honest discussion about these things. I cannot refrain to say it was actually really very interesting to learn that there are still slight differences of opinion and approaches within the different universities. And through our selection of our participants, our speakers, we hope that we could highlight sort of the difference between the different institutions. But although we're recognizing that there are differences because of resources and just opinion and applying different lenses, I think it is important just to select a few strands where there were a really commonality, and we all recognize those as well, like ethical approaches to AI, the literacies, the importance of training, which I absolutely agree, and I can see different institutions apply this very differently. And of course, then the phrase of the day, and thank you very much for that, for our colleague from the UFP, and that is human in the loop. Very important. We use that phrase very often when we talk with editors, etc., and we talk about peer review. And then, of course, equity and access, and the whole dilemma around digitization, and of course, then the digital divide, which, in my opinion, is really still a major problem. And I think that's manifesting in the different institutions. And then, of course, continuous support. But the one thing that really struck me was the consultative process that each and every institution went through, almost a bottom-up approach, and then continuous discussion and emphasizing that. I think that was very important to me, and to realize this is not the beginning and the end of it all. It certainly is just the beginning of many things to come. I also really like the way where how the differentiation took place. Interesting to see that the differences of approaches in the differentiation issue. But I think that really needs to be probed, and to think about that maybe that is differentiation is still the answer for where we are at the moment. And then in terms of the honesty that was expressed today, and that is really to say that we have to have an educative approach. It's our responsibility to educate and to train our stakeholders at hand. And also to say to each other, there are still so many issues that we're actually ignoring, and there's still a huge uncertainty in this field, regardless of the amount of work that we do, and then the uncertainty that is sort of accompanied by it. And then highlighting the whole issue about trust. Science is in a very difficult position. Science is not necessarily trusted. And how do we, in this age of new technologies, nurture trust in science, and that we actually grow them? So I think that is very important. We cannot stay behind. We have to follow suit with the rest of the world. Somebody said to me the other day, it's not that AI will replace the work as such, but it will replace the human that has not been working and engaging and with AI as such. So I think that's also important. I just, by closing, would like to mention that ASSAf will be establishing a AI forum. And then certainly we've got your names, and we will invite you once the forum has been established. That you can participate, and that we, in different ways, perhaps can continue this discussion. I think this is very important, and certainly not the last. Thank you very much to our speakers this afternoon. It has been great. Thank you for participating and really putting your heart on the table so we could talk about these issues. Thank you for that. Martin, thank you very much for so eloquently taking us again through all of this. Thank you for ASSAf for granting this opportunity, and thank you to my colleagues for arranging this webinar. And of course, very important, our participants. We had a lovely bumper number today joining. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you soon, and to see you in the next webinar as well. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.